everyone! In last week's exciting episode of JayEmm On Cars, I drove the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, a car which I really liked. Now, in that same video, I said that car took people by surprise after the 4C seemed to disappoint so many people with its promise of being an Italian Elise. Well, at that time, I'd never driven a 4C, and now I'm going to. This belongs to my friend Steve, who's had a few different cars, and he's appeared on the channel a couple of times. Now, he had a Merc, well, he had a few Mercs, and he then had an XC Sport 350, which he sold and got a C63, which I did my best to try and avert, but wasn't successful. That then became an E63, and the E63, logically, became an Alfa Romeo 4C. Now, the 4C's got an interesting reputation. I think when it came out, it got criticisms mainly for its steering. People said that, you know, this has an unassisted steering rack. There's no power steering whatsoever. And people had hoped that meant it would have glorious, lovely, Lotus-like steering feel. And apparently it didn't. Now, I actually considered buying one of these a couple of years ago when I got my Evora, and there's a couple of reasons that I didn't. Now, at the time, the Spider, which this is, had just been announced. At the time of filming, the regular Coupe 4C has just been axed. Everyone was a little confused as to what was going on because people thought that the 4C entirely was being trashed, but I believe it's just the Coupe which is being discontinued. It's disappeared off the Alfa website for sure. Now, to me, that's absolutely logical, because why would you have a car like this and put a roof on it? Just having the roof off option just makes it so much nicer, it really does. The things which put me off the 4C at the time were the small 4-cylinder turbocharged engine and the dual clutch gearbox. I wanted something with at least 6 cylinders and a manual box. The other thing that put me off was the fact that I asked if I could drive a 4C, and I was told that the only way that was going to happen was if I bought one. And I then have to really hope that I liked it. Yeah, that just wasn't gonna happen. Driving this car on these roads, which are pretty lumpy and bumpy, as with most of the roads I test cars on, it's actually not too bad. Now, the steering does tug at you a bit. This is its sort of major characteristic, is it likes to dart off into the hedges. Now, there's a couple of companies which offer to sort this for you, and I've been told that the car is much transformed after that. However, ignoring that characteristic, I actually do really like the steering. I don't even mind the steering wheel itself. It's slightly chunky, but it's got this flat bottom to it, and it's a good size. The steering is nice and direct. And despite the fact that this car is as wide as the average bus, after only a mile or so, it really does start to shrink around you. You can place it nicely and easily. You've got these big haunches here, and I feel like I'm sat right at the front of the car. I've spent the last week driving a couple of different cars, an Audi RS3 and another piece of slightly older Italian Exotica, which has a completely different driving position. I actually really do like this. Now, I'm sure you can hear that exhaust. This car has the Alfa Sports exhaust, or racing exhaust, or whatever they want to call it. Now, this is not the Akrapovic exhaust, which is now offered with them. That exhaust is switchable. This one is not. It's always this loud. Now, so far, the gearbox is doing okay, but I haven't had the chance to press on in the car, so we'll find out soon just how it performs. Now, there's a little LCD display down here, but because of where Alfa have put the wheel, I can't actually read the top of it, but hey-ho. Now, these seats do put you in a slightly odd driving position. I am extremely upright. I'd personally like to be a little bit more reclined in them. They are comfy enough.
It's adjustable.
They do recline, do they?
Yeah, there's a lever on the side.
Aha! There you go. I'm wrong. I thought they were fixed back seats, and they aren't. They do recline. It does sort of recline a bit, but not with much enthusiasm. So you know, seats nil point. Now I got to admit that on paper I got a big problem with this car. Now when it was announced and when it came out, you look at it and you go, oh, it's going to be like an Elise. Now it does have this absolutely gorgeous, glorious carbon fiber tub, which you can see from in here. It has this really big chunky weave, and it is a really impressive piece of engineering, but it comes at a price. This car today, brand new, starts at just shy of £60,000. That is £12,000 more than a Lotus Elise Cup 250, and it's £20,000 more than an Elise 220. Now you might say, okay, yeah, well that's because of the advanced carbon tub and everything, which of course makes it much lighter than the Elise. Yeah, you see, it doesn't. This is a good 100 kilos heavier than the Lotus, which isn't good. On the interior front, I'm slightly confused as to what Alfa were thinking. Yeah, the tub, beautiful. These seats, stunning, gorgeous, proper Italian leather. And then this dash is literally the nastiest plastic that they could possibly think of. It's got a single DIN unit here. I mean, this is a modern car, and switch gear that I think I took the mickey out of in the Abarth 595, a car which costs something like 13 grand, in a car which costs 60. It's just not acceptable. I'm pretty confident, Abarth, you could have found the Wonga to put some nicer switches and stuff in here. You're an Italian car. This is what you do. You make these things nicer than everybody else. Where this car will beat an Elise is not in the headline power figure or the 0 to 60, but in the torque. It's got a lot more of it and a lot lower down. This thing pulls very hard. It also dances under braking. It's really alive, this thing. Oh, it does move. It does move all over the place. It's a bit fun. You need to be awake when you're driving this thing. I think people blame the steering for being uncommunicative. That's not at all the case. The steering is very communicative. It's just shouting. It's very Italian. Very Italian. I mean, the noise is actually okay. I've heard a couple of these go past, and they don't sound great from outside. They are very loud. I heard Steve coming from about half a mile away. Inside, it's okay. It does turn quick. I do really like that. Ride's okay too. One of the options you can specify with these is a racing suspension. Now, a few car magazines, when these came out, said please don't specify the racing suspension. And when I found a forum earlier discussing it, it was the one thing every single person was on there saying, please, for the love of God, do not spec the racing suspension. And honestly, if you live in the UK, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Save your spine. This is absolutely, you wouldn't want the car any firmer than this. The gearbox is actually not that bad, and the engine and gearbox are both better than I thought. The chassis, I wasn't really worried about letting this car down. I know it's the thing that everyone complains about, but for me, as someone who really enjoys naturally aspirated or supercharged throttle response and a manual gear shift, I was worried that the twin clutch box was going to let it down. I've driven a few twin clutches recently that have not been as good as they could be. This one's actually pretty good. The paddles, although they are kind of plastic and cheap looking, actually feel okay. They got a very, very short throw. You know when you've pressed them, which I know sounds really obvious, but I've driven quite a few cars where it's a bit mushy, it's a bit indistinct. It's like the gear shift in a van. You never quite know whether you've actually done it yet or not. Obviously it's not too quiet in here with the roof off, but you really don't get buffeted around that much. That is another Elise-like quality, and that's a very, very good thing. Brakes are pretty decent. Oh, nice old XJS. Honestly, at the minute, the only thing letting this car down is how cheap Alfa have been on the interior front. I kind of feel like they sort of let themselves down. You know, it's like they were playing a fantasy football league and they decided just to sort of put two guys in there that cost them all their points, and the rest of the squad is made up by sort of, you know, blind one-legged people that thought they were going to play rugby instead of football. It's not going to work. You need a balanced package, and unfortunately, and the thing I really can't understand is that traditionally stuff like the interior is where the Italians score very, very highly. If I'm truthful, when I'm sat in this, I feel like I'm sat more in a product of Fiat than I am of Alfa Romeo. Probably not helped by the fact that I've spent the last couple of days swanning around in an old Ferrari which has got leather in places where you didn't even know the car had places. So, you know, that'll skew your perception somewhat. But I think for the money that they're asking, that's something that can't be ignored. Overall though, should you buy an Alfa 4C? Well, from a value perspective, I cannot make an argument for it, because an Elise is just as quick, does handle a bit better, and is quite a bit cheaper, plus has a lot more aftermarket parts because they've been around forever. An Exige sounds better, is a lot faster. An Exige 350 is cheaper than one of these, and obviously you can then spend a lot more money on an Exige if you want to go even quicker than that. But then the Exige also does feel a little bit cheap on the inside too, so I can't really single the Alfa out for that too much. But of course then the Exige does have a 3.5 litre V6 and a very nice manual box. The Alfa really is quite different. Now the good news is that these have depreciated quite a bit since they came out, and there's now quite a few of them available on the used market at reasonable prices. Let's say the sort of price that if you're considering a new Elise would make this a very interesting and tempting alternative. And as much as I hate to say it, when it comes to the small, compact, hardcore, lightweight, driver-focused market, well, the Elise really is the mainstream option. And this is a sort of cool, weird, out there alternative. And the main thing for me with a car like this, you'll have seen me mention this many times because it is one of my core principles, is that I believe when you see a car of anything more than about 30 grand, you have to see it and go, yeah, I want it. When Steve bought his E63, I thought he was trying to take up a new career as some sort of masochistic taxi driver that never wanted to make any money on his runs because he was spending 50 quid on fuel every time he picked somebody up. With this though, oh, it's gone, it went bing at me. It didn't want to give me a gear, how dare it. When he turned up in this today though, and this is the first time that I've seen his car in the flesh, even though white is not my colour, I must say I did look at it and think, yeah, good choice, Steve. He claims he's not going to sell it for a while. I hope he isn't. quite like it. Just needs more leather in it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this different video, and please like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.